All right, it's that time. Now it's time that we can finally give Madame Web all the accolades we want. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today I am doing my top 10 best movies of 2020. What? I've lost my mind. We're doing my top 10 best movies of 2024 and my top 5 worst movies, because I finally had enough to actually warrant a worst list. Yes, so I was wondering, trying to debate if I should even do a full video for this, if I should just do an Instagram post for all of them and have more time for other videos, but I was able to figure out how to do it in with all the other stuff that I wanted to do for January and February, and honestly, I just felt like I needed to talk about them for specific reasons that I'll get to more with the top 10 best, but more so because I was just watching all of, everybody's end of the year ones, and it's just so much fun to talk about them. There's just a lot that I want to say, so I was like, you know what, let's just go for it, and let's do all of them in one go, one big video. Let's get it done. Starting off with the dishonorable mentions, Godzilla and Kong: The New Empire, for being a pretty entertaining movie interspliced with possibly some of the worst screenwriting I have seen in a while. Venom: The Last Dance, which was fun, but we knew it was going to be on there. Megalopolis, I appreciate the ambition, it just didn't land. Argyle, again, I appreciate the zaniness that Matt Vaughn brings to it, but there was something just off about it. Wasn't his best. Kinds of Kindness, which easily could have not even made this list at all had I cared about any of the 3 stories that were in it. And Self-Reliance, which I actually liked as a movie for the most part, but the ending is so anticlimactic. It is one of the biggest waste of time movies I've ever seen. Okay, here we go. Top 5 worst movies of the year. I usually don't have these because I don't go out and actively watch a movie I think is going to be bad, but I either went out and watched bad movies this year, or I just got really disappointed in something I thought was actually going to be pretty good. And starting at number 5, Joker: Folie à Deux. Yeah, when I first watched the movie and then I did my review, I think I had a little bit more of a positive outlook on it. But since watching everybody else's reviews and then bringing up a lot of points about what they did with characters and what they did with plot, I already knew that when I walked out of it. I was obviously very disappointed to begin with, but it's just a slap in the face movie. Everything about this movie that they did was a pure insult to people who liked the first one. Now, it almost didn't make the actual list just because I do like the cinematography, and it is quite beautifully shot. And I can't blame the actors for any of the acting. They did the best they could with what they had. But this script was just purposefully so deflating. They didn't do anything we wanted with it. I still hold that maybe if you watched it on its own without the first one, there might be something here, but it would still be super boring. So, I don't know. It ended up falling a lot more down the ranks for me than I thought it would. It's just gonna be looked back on as a big disappointment. At number 4, Trap. This movie, honestly, is probably the most rewatchable of the 5 I have in my top 5 worst of the year, but it's just so damn stupid. Half of this movie is so unbelievably dumb. The first half is still fine. I still think the first half is passable, at least, especially for a Shyamalan movie. But the second half just gets so out of pocket with everything that happens. There's no way some of these things could happen feasibly, that no one would see these things, the way that he gets out of stuff. Decisions that characters make, and like Shyamalan's daughter being put front and center when, yeah, if you're going to make a movie showcasing her singing, fine, still not the best reason to make a movie, but fine. But then don't make her act too, and make her such a big part of the second part if she can't act. It's just, there was so much contrivance in this movie, it was ridiculous. And again, you can look at it as actually a little bit goofier, and that might make it better. And Josh Hartnett actually does a really great job with, again, what he's given, but it's just not good. At number 3 is Madame Web, the dark horse of this entire year that everyone just keeps coming back to for worst movies, worst use of production studio money, everything. Just everything about this movie is so just mishandled. There's no care put into it. They just said, fuck it, let's be over with this thing. and they were done. They just shot something. Dakota Johnson has literally zero fucks to give in this movie. And for that reason, and almost that reason alone, is why it's not number 2 or 1, because it is actually, weirdly enough, entertaining in its own right for being so bad. It's not as so bad it's good as other movies, because there are some parts that actually are slightly passable, and it does take itself a little bit seriously. If it took itself a little bit less seriously, this would actually be a fantastic, so bad it's good movie. But everything about it is just so terrible that they just didn't even try. The ADR, the acting, the script, some of the a lot of the shots, the story in general, the fact that you have a character no one cares about, made them young just to appeal to audiences, the fact that everything in your promo and your ads and trailers was a lie because you don't even show half of it for more than 5 seconds in the movie. Everything about, again, it's insulting. There's so many movies this year that were just so insulting. But it was still slightly entertaining, at least more so than these top 2. At number 2, a movie that just made its way onto this list last night as I was watching it, Emilia Perez. This has gotten so much buzz because it's been nominated for Oscar after Oscar after Oscar, and that's after winning so many awards from the Golden Globes. I didn't even know about this movie until the Golden Globes, and then it won all these things, and I said, okay, these are the movies I still want to watch before the Oscars. And then I heard all of this buzz about how it's so bad and people don't like it, and I'm thinking, all right, well, there's got to be something to it that they would nominate it for all these things. And I'm not going to go into it too much because I'm going to talk about this a little bit later in another video before the Oscars. But guys, this... I wanted to go into it with an open mind, being like, maybe I'm hating this the first 10 minutes of it because I've been told to hate it. Everyone's, okay, let me clear my mind, watch it as if I didn't hear anything about it. And then 5 minutes later, I was like, you know what? I hate it because I hate it. The more I think about this movie, every single element is either bad, offensive, or just straight up atrocious. I didn't think I was getting a hate on this movie as much as I did, and then I was putting it in my Letterboxd, and it fell so hard to literally the bottom 2. I don't get it. I don't understand what the point of this movie is. I don't know what I'm supposed to get out of it. I am honestly astounded by this movie. I'm not sure what it was supposed to be telling me. And the music sucked. This was a worse musical than Joker. That tells you something. And number 1, my least favorite and worst movie of the year, The Front Room. The case could definitely be made that this is not nearly as bad as Emilia Perez, because Emilia Perez is just like blatantly offensive and terrible, and I get that. And also with Madame Web. Madame Web was so bad. But this movie, I went into it not only kind of excited for a horror movie, but excited for an A24 kind of indie horror movie with what seemed to be maybe some religious undertones, some really tense moments. Whereas the other movies, I was at least intrigued by all the way through, or entertained by, or like, where's this going to go? I was so unbelievably irritated by this movie about halfway through. I almost left. Because whereas it actually starts fine, it starts like a good A24 horror movie, by the middle of this movie, there is just like a 10-minute sequence of just a woman screaming for help 24/7, a baby crying, doorbells ringing. It literally is an assault on the senses. And I get it that it's supposed to be reflecting what this character is going through, but it's also what the audience now has to go through. And it was unbelievably irritating. I was getting a headache. I wanted to leave. By that point, I realized this is not really going to be a horror movie. It's going to be kind of tense, and there's a little bit of weird stuff going on, but mostly it's just suspenseful conversations here and there that aren't really leading up to anything. The same story going around and around. Every scene is just the same thing, and I'm like, can we progress to something, please? It honestly, it's not even scary. All it is family drama at a certain point, and I just didn't care. They try to give you one scene where there's just that weird A24 style of religious imagery being creepy, and that was fine, but I was just done with this movie by that point. and then the end comes and there's a twist that makes you go, oh, for about 2 seconds, and then you go, yeah, well, yeah. It's not really a twist, that's just kind of what we expected to happen. And again, I mean, it's done in a way that's like, for half a second, I'm kind of shocked, I'm like, whoa, and then I'm like, no, I don't really care. All the other movies were like passable, or at least I was entertained by something, or like maybe it'll get better. I wanted to leave this movie halfway through and not come back. Okay, that was a lot of negativity. Let's move on to the positive stuff. Let's move on to the best and my favorite movies of the year. Now, the reason specifically for best that I wanted to do an actual video and explain them was because I don't know what it is about this past year, but there weren't that many movies where I could confidently say, this was number one. This is in my top 5. Like, I don't know if it was me or the movies that just came out this year or what, but it kind of felt to me like most of the movies I saw were either disappointing or I was finding some nitpick flaw in them. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because reviewing movies for so long now, I'm like looking for something bad. Like it can't be perfect. I can't give it a 4 out of 4, you know, whereas like if you're just watching movies, you'd be like, yeah, I fucking loved it. Great, 4 out of 4. I'm like, okay, well, I need to have like a reason for a 4 out of 4. Or a reason not to, you know? Maybe it's just the movies that came out this year, but it felt like every movie was like that, where I had so much expectation. And maybe it's expectation. Maybe I just need to stop having expectation, because it seems like every time I do, I get slightly disappointed, and every time I go into it being like, this is gonna be whatever, it's gonna suck. I like it more than I thought I would. I was trying to figure out this top 10. I sat down, I went through my Letterboxd, I just went one by one, and I came up with a list that in my gut, I was like, you know what, this feels good. And I was pretty surprised what actually ended up on this list. It wasn't a very, like, okay, by the end of the year, I kind of know what's going to be on there. It was a very interesting time this time. Starting off with the honorable mentions, Smile 2, Anora, The First Omen, Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and The Wild Robot. Now, I'm not going to lie, The Wild Robot almost made it onto this list. It was on the list for a while, and I kept going back and forth number 10. And the reason that The Wild Robot came into the honorable mentions, because it's like, just if there was an 11, that's it. It's because while I do think it is a perfect movie, I just didn't connect with it as much as I thought I would. That being said, it is a beautiful movie, and it is practically perfect. I mean, I guess I'm making this just like number 11. I already talked about this in my, end of the year live stream, but I just wanted to mention it again because I was having such a hard time with this. And I was thinking, all right, for number 10, I gotta go with my gut, and that was Abigail. I really got into just like, and I mean, I guess the year got into just all these fun horror movies, and Radio Silence always does such a good job with these movies that are scary, but they're fun. You know, they're horror, but they're horror that like a general audience could find fun. You know, they're not like actually scary, but they are labeled under horror because it's more so just about like gore and tense moments and suspense. But these movies are also original, and they're fun, and they have humor in them. And Abigail is right up there with Ready or Not and the other two Screams. It's just so much fun. I always love a group of people coming in to a situation. You have, one of each type of personality, and being stuck in the house with this monster, which at this point I don't think is a spoiler, is the little girl that they have kidnapped for a ransom. That is such a cool idea. I was just really feeling that. I was like, this is so much fun. I'm getting all these Halloween vibes, this like fun horror vibes. Everything about it was just very entertaining. And I think this came out like in, I want to say March or April. So it was a good way to like be still starting off the year. And I personally think that it was, at least from what I've seen, Melissa Barrera's best role. At number 9, Heretic. As soon as I saw the trailer for this movie, I knew it was one of those movies where I'm going to latch onto it and it's going to be good. It's not going to disappoint me. I just had a feeling it seemed like one that maybe would go under the rug. I wasn't sure. And it's so good. But the funniest part is, the parts that are so good aren't even the straight up horror parts. There are straight up scary moments in this movie. But the best parts are the conversations. It's the debates. It's the points that they both bring up on both sides. And I'm like, whoa, you know what? That's true. that might be true. Oh my god, now I gotta do research. Now you got me thinking. And it's like, it's a movie that really can influence because you have to know what you're talking about to write the screenplay. It has to be like you actually have points in order for this movie to be valid. It was so well done, and Hugh Grant just kicked ass. It might be my favorite role that he's done. The only reason it's a little bit lower on the list is because of some second half to third act kind of things that happen in the movie where I was like, it feels like they're kind of like the screenplay could go through like one more round here for like, it feels like you're patching up some plot holes or something. It kind of was like going in circles for a second. And then the third act, a lot of people weren't super surprised by the answer he was trying to get out of them. But I think on a rewatch, it'll all come together. But Heretic was far and away one of the best movies that I've seen this year in terms of horror. And something that just does it differently. It's horror that's different. It's religious movie that's different. At number 8, coming in with another horror, Nosferatu. And again, another one that I was like, I am so freaking hyped for this movie. It's gonna be so beautifully shot, and it is absolutely Robert Eggers' best shot movie. It's beautiful. The gothic atmosphere is amazing, and honestly, I would have just liked all of that throughout the movie. I don't even care if there's a plot. A lot of people thought that this movie was really boring and it was too slow, and I didn't give a shit about any of that because it was just so cool. Robert Eggers is perfect for atmosphere in his movies, and especially in historical, pieces. All of the acting, especially from Lily Rose Depp, is amazing. Bill Skarsgård, would never in a million years have guessed that it was him. I've since learned from when I did my review that the voice is not done in post. That is just his voice. That is insane. I do have that one gripe about the design. I'm still not going to say what it was because it's still pretty recent, but I get it. I like it for something else, just not for Nosferatu. Number 7, Dune Part 2. When it comes to Dune Part 2, there are things that I like more in this one than in the first, and there are things that I still like from the first more. Putting them together, it's just phenomenal. It's so good. There's things in this movie visually, audibly, that I cannot fathom seeing in any other movie. I don't know how Denis Villeneuve does it, but for 2 movies now, it's felt like he is able to literally push the movie past the borders of the screen, have sound that just doesn't seem like it should happen that way. In the first one, I was so shocked by this that in the second one, it almost seemed like yeah, this is what we get now. We just get all these great things, and we're going to get this really complex story. And in this one, I was actually able to follow the story a little bit more clearly for the most part, to the point where I was almost like, wait, did I do something wrong? Like, I'm supposed to be confused, right? I will say I think this one, where it definitely fares better in terms of action, plot, getting it going. The first one, I think, has better atmosphere, but I really like the character development in this one because the first one is basically mostly atmosphere and world building and world setup. And in this one, you get a lot more about the characters and the plot actually advances. I did think that the plot actually advances a little bit too quickly based on what I was expecting, but there's so much incredible action in this movie, and they're just following what the book does, so I am super excited for Part 3. Number 6, the spiritual pairing for Abigail on this list, Lisa Frankenstein. Again, this was early on in the year, giving me super big Halloween vibes, and I've said this word for so many of the movies already, but the aesthetic, the vibe of this movie is so much fun. Whereas Abigail is more of like a straight up horror, but it's a fun horror, and it's very Halloween-y, monster in the house kind of thing. This one is just like it's like odd, because the vibe of it's not necessarily Halloween. It's more so, obviously romance and high school and 80s, but with a monster in it. It was just very different. I hadn't really seen anything like this before, and again, it was another one that I was like, this is gonna go under the rug. People aren't gonna really notice it as much, and that's kind of what happened. Like, people talk about it when they, get extensive into their movie list. They're like, oh yeah, I really like Lisa Frankenstein, but it's not one of the first ones that comes to their mind from last year, which really sucks. And this was the first movie of last year that I saw where immediately, maybe 10 minutes into the movie, I went, this should be nominated for Best Cinematography or Production Design for the Oscars. Or makeup, hair, anything. And of course it wasn't. And it's just crazy to me because everything about the design of this movie is so cool. I just love 80s stuff. I love synth stuff. I love Halloween. So all of that put together is going to be so much fun. Catherine Newton was so fun. It was a very Heathers type movie, you know, that like rebellious crime and being kind of a troublemaker, edgy. I dress cool now. But there was also obviously this like wholesome aspect with Cole Sprouse playing a zombie. Like everything about it was just so much fun. I really, really loved it. At number 5, Alien Romulus. This is the first one I think that I was really shocked was going to end up on the list. Because I like Alien enough. When I saw it the first time, like the original, I was like, yeah, this is fine. I didn't really appreciate what it did for horror then, or just for movies in general, because, you know, we're used to all the horror that we have now. So it seems a little bit more simplistic, but when you look at it, you know, under the lens of what it did before all this other stuff came out, you know, I can appreciate it so much more. And even then it holds up as still one of the best horrors just by itself. I saw that this was coming out, and I was like, well, you know what, we've had, like, so many Alien movies by this point, and I know most of them kind of just suck or okay at best. So, you know, this one's just Alien with another name behind it. It's like Terminator. It's just Terminator Resurgence, Genesis, with another name behind it. And it's just going to be like a throwaway sequel. And they went back to basics on this one. And it was fantastic. I loved it. It had that quiet atmosphere. It was tense and scary. It had all of the prosthetics and the like the practical effects that make horror good. And they went back to that. There was one thing that they did that's like a little bit questionable. They probably could have done without it, but it's fine because it still wasn't a huge part of the story and it served its purpose. And I really liked the characters. I liked the relationships in this movie. But the thing that really puts it over the top was the third act. There's something that happens in this third act, and I don't like remember a lot of times that I will like viscerally be like, oh, during a movie. I remember seeing this thing and going, oh, like there was just something about this that I did not expect that. It was very interesting, and it turned a lot of people off, but for me, I thought it was so cool, a very inventive way to go with it. I know it's been done before, but I had never seen it, and I just thought it was great. I just thought all the way through it was a great horror movie. At number 4, Conclave. This is another one that I'm not going to go into very extensively because I'm going to talk about it in another video before the Oscars. But this one very much just surprised the hell out of me because I saw the trailer for this and went, this looks just huge. You know, it has that huge feel and scope to it for the subject matter at hand. But I didn't think I was going to like it as much as I did. I thought, it's just another religious movie. Another movie about the popes and about what the church is doing wrong. It was, I mean, it's very simple, but it's very effective because it's, again, kind of like Heretic, it's all conversation and the politics and the mind games that goes into this. And how everybody sort of says that they're doing this for one religious reason or the other, and that's not really the case. Let's be real. It just hit every point from start to finish. And again, what really pushed it over for me was the third act, which could turn people off, which could have ruined the rest of the movie, which was pretty great already up to that point, but it just does something that I was like, yes. It was really thought-provoking, and I never thought it would go that way. I didn't know what was going to happen, but that is not the thing I thought was going to happen, and that really just pushed it into incredible movie territory for me. Number 3, The Substance. The last one on the list that, again, I won't go into a lot because I'm going to talk about it. There's just a lot of Oscar movies that I watched very recently, and I don't want to go into them too much before I do this other video, but The Substance was yet another one I saw the trailer for. I just kept seeing little things for and didn't really think too much of it, and then I just kept hearing it's fantastic. So I finally watched it, and it's just so interesting. It's got a very original and interesting plot and all these cool rules to the world. And I thought, there's no way that I can get through this movie without finding a plot hole or a rule that doesn't make sense, or they do something and it's like, well, why? There's maybe one thing where I'm like, why did that happen? But it makes for such a good scene, I don't care. And it's not like a plot hole. I just can't exactly explain why it happens. But the style in this movie is so exaggerated and interesting. The production design, the way that they do all of the body horror. And honestly, the scariest parts of this movie aren't even the body horror parts. Yeah, they're gross and everything, but the scariest parts are what it's trying to say about our self-image and the emotional parts that go into that. And it just struck every chord on that one. Number 2, Inside Out 2. I didn't think they could do it. I thought they could do it, but I didn't think they could do it so well. Taking what is a practically perfect animated movie and doing a sequel with almost the same plot, like obviously there's differences, but just add a new character and do it again. And the way that they're able to personify with just such rigid imagery all of these abstract concepts while also making it entertaining, also doing funny little puns and gags, also making you feel so much emotion is incredible. It is insane. This was the first movie I walked out and went, that's my number 1 movie of the year so far. This was halfway into the year. I hadn't had a clear number 1 up till that point, and then it was this. And like when it comes to things like anxiety in movies, I'm like, yeah, we've seen it so often. It's like, how much more can I feel seen, by how they portray it? And there's just a moment in this movie where something happens. Somebody says something, and you're like, oh, that hits. And it was just so unbelievably well done. If they make a third one, it could possibly be a perfect trilogy. And number 1, you already know what it is. It's Wicked. I was just so blown away by this movie, and part of the reason it's number 1 is because the expectations were met by the delivery. It's like one of the only ones where, again, my mind was even like, there's gotta be something wrong with it. There's gotta be something wrong with it. And like, yeah, with something this huge, there's gonna be like, oh, there's that little thing, or there's this little nitpick. But it is such a ginormous scale of a movie. It's one of my favorite musicals with some of my favorite songs, and they really could have screwed it up or just made it like it's fine or it's passable. But it has blown the doors off of other musicals that came out this year. Not that there was a super high bar to match. They did such an amazing job with every element of the movie. The acting, the emotion, the musical numbers, the choreography, the production design, the cinematography, everything. The more I watched the trailer, I'm more and more excited every single time, and it just delivered. And I'm very excited. I still haven't yet, but I'm very excited to go into one of the sing-along screenings of it. It could be actually kind of terrible, but who knows? But if for nothing else, just to be able to go back into the world of Oz, even though it's very different. It's obviously it's a different story. It's a different time. It's kind of taking liberties because it's made into a musical. But just to be able to see a lot of that magic, honestly, when we get to Jeff Goldblum as the wizard, even though a lot of people didn't love it, I loved it. I loved that whole sequence and his little display, his diorama, everything. It was just so cool, and it's really one of the only straight up fantasy movies that we had this year. So I really appreciate that, because we don't really, we get a lot of horror and we get a lot of indie, but we don't get a lot of fantasy anymore. So it's really fun to see that. Well, those are my top 10 best and my top 5 worst of the year. It's so much fun to talk about all this stuff. It's very easy to get caught up in just talking and talking and talking. I will also leave down below in the comments all the movies I didn't get to see. I tried my damnedest, but there's just too many. I'm going to leave in the comments, in the description below, all the movies that I didn't get to see that I would have wanted to see. There's some that I just don't care. Even if I didn't see them, I don't care. I'm not going to see them. I didn't really want to in the first place. And if you are interested in checking out my entire ranking of all 55 movies that I saw of last year, you can look on my Letterboxd under MJ McDonald 09, and it will be a little avatar of work from over the garden wall. Well, guys, let me know what you thought of this past year of movies in general. What are your favorites? What are your least favorites? What do you think was atrocious? What do you think was incredible? What surprised you? Except for one more video of the Oscars stuff, we're pretty much wrapped up from 2024. So it is 2025, full steam ahead. And as always, keep your hopes high, your stress low, and movies right in the middle. I'll see you guys later.